Great. I think we can start. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, Growing Trust Beyond Forest, PEFC Trees Outside of Forest Certification for Urban Forestry and Agroforestry. My name is Arianna Johnny, and I'm PEFC International Forestry and Conservation Officer. So, despite what my title may say, in PEFC we do not only worry about forests. And in our current world, agroforestry systems and urban forests are becoming increasingly important to provide vital ecosystem services like clean air, clean water, habitat for animals, and climate regulation, as well as food, material, and supporting rural livelihood for millions of people. And as their importance grows, so does the need to ensure that these systems are managed sustainably. So today we will explore why these systems are important, what sustainable management means, and how can these good practices on the ground translate into trusted and credible claims. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by an excellent and diverse panel of speakers representing both urban forestry and agroforestry. Together, they will share their expertise on the importance of these systems, the key challenges we face in scaling them up globally, and real-life examples of sustainable management and how certification is being applied in practice. The webinar is divided into two sessions. The first will be focused on agroforestry and the second focused on urban forestry, and each one will be followed then by a Q&A. So before we begin, a couple of housekeeping rules. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask your questions during the webinar. These will be answered during the Q&A sessions or directly into the chat. Finally, recording and slides will be shared with participants via email in a few days from the webinar. So before we begin, what is PEFC? PEFC stands for the Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification, and it's an international non-profit organization that promotes sustainable forest and trees outside of forest management through independent third-party certification. With almost 3 million hectares, we represent around 70% of the world's certified forest. PEFC is an umbrella organization which endorses national forest certification systems, which are developed in multi-stakeholders, consensus-based processes, and are adapted to local contexts, while meeting internationally agreed sustainability requirements. These requirements are defined in the PEFC Sustainable Forest Management Benchmark Standard, which is then adapted by each national systems to their specific environmental, social, and legal conditions. Since 2018, the scope of the standard has been extended to trees outside of forest to ensure the sustainable management of trees within the systems, which include agroforestry and urban forestry. So far, 7 national members have developed a trees outside of forest standard: Bulgaria, France, India, Italy, Netherlands, Portugal, and the United Kingdom. So let's start with the agroforestry session. Agroforestry is not a new concept, but it is one which appears to have growing potential. And with the next speakers, we're going to explore why and how. So our first speaker will help set the scene by explaining what agroforestry is and why it matters. In the meantime, if you would like to learn more about PEFC work in agroforestry, please scan the QR code on the screen to access our brochure. And we will show again this QR code at the end of the webinar, so do not worry if you're not able to scan it now. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day, Elaine Springay. Unfortunately, Elaine is not able to join us live today, but she has kindly prepared a pre-recorded presentation for us. Elaine is FAO Agroforestry Officer, and she brings more than 12 years of experience in international development with a strong focus on integrated natural resource management, community-based forest management, and climate-smart agriculture. Before joining FAO, she worked with NGOs in government agencies in Canada, Ghana, the Philippines, and Uganda, supporting community-based natural resource management, livelihood, and capacity development initiatives.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elaine Springay, the agroforestry officer for FAO, based at our headquarters in Rome, Italy. However, I am joining you today from Vancouver, Canada, and the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam Band of the Coast Salish First Nations or Indigenous peoples. Before I begin, I would like to apologize for not being able to attend the webinar in person, providing a pre-recorded video instead. I have been asked today to give a broad introduction to agroforestry and how the certification of agroforestry products, including wood and non-wood forest products, can support the transformation of agri-food systems and incentivize the adoption and scaling up of agroforestry systems. But first, what do we mean by agroforestry? FAO emphasizes that agroforestry is a collective term for land management practices where woody perennials are deliberately integrated and managed with agricultural crops and/or animals. Agroforestry systems can be found in forest, agriculture, and even rangelands. As such, agroforestry systems are diverse. Most importantly, when intentionally designed and managed, agroforestry systems can create a broad 50 years since agroforestry has been promoted as a sustainable solution to land and forest management, we have consistently found a number of obstacles to successful implementation. Most of these issues are not actually farm-based, but rather relate to the enabling environments that support, or rather don't support, agroforestry. Addressing these challenges is where the opportunities lie that will ultimately drive the successful scaling up of agroforestry. So while secure tenure is generally a prerequisite for successful agroforestry implementation, it is economic viability, including market access and incentives, that will likely drive long-term practices and the transformation of agri-food systems. Generally speaking, economic viability has been and is often overlooked in favor for more ecological and subsistence-based agroforestry systems. Yet, there is a growing understanding that smallholder farms are small businesses, and income generation and livelihood security are often priorities in farmer decision making. So how can we best support agroforestry implementation and transform challenges into opportunities? To better understand how FAO could best address these agroforestry related challenges, we conducted numerous assessments, including a global capacity needs assessment and assessments of agroforestry projects in FAO and EFAD. I invite you to use the QR codes to access the publications featured on the slide. So, needs assessment. Around 1,600 respondents from 145 countries self-assessed their capacities and identified knowledge gaps and emerging trends in agroforestry. The results not only reaffirmed the known challenges, but also helped to specify the needs of different stakeholders and regions. It also provided information on which actors are already addressing agroforestry capacities, including we identified these main existing capacities and gaps. Capacities to plan and manage the different components of agroforestry and their interactions were high, as well as capacities related to community engagement and training. What was interesting is that almost all respondents who claimed expertise in these areas also wanted further capacity development in the same topics. We suspect this is due to the contextual nature of agroforestry and experts being trained in specific agroforestry systems and a limited number of species. Not surprisingly, aspects related to the enabling environment of agroforestry, including economic feasibility and governance, had very low capacity across all stakeholder groups from all regions. It is these gaps, economic feasibility and governance, where certification of timber and non-wood forest products from agroforestry can have the greatest impact. So what is FAO's comparative advantage in addressing agroforestry capacity needs? FAO plans to address capacity gaps through our new agroforestry direction and our three main priorities. Our first priority is to promote agroforestry as sustainable production systems. The goal is to strengthen capacities to design and implement solution-based agroforestry systems that are designed and managed to be economically viable and environmentally sustainable. We cannot know if we have successfully scaled up agroforestry without a baseline of where and how much agroforestry there is. Therefore, our second priority is to improve agroforestry monitoring at national, regional, and global levels. Our third priority is to support the development of national policies and strategies that adequately enable the implementation and financing of agroforestry production and its related value chains. To find out more about our global agroforestry program, I invite you to visit our website through the QR code. So this may all sound nice, but how does certification fit? Let's take a look again at the challenges and opportunities for scaling up agroforestry and consider the role of certification in addressing these efforts. Certification of agroforestry products, whether timber or non-wood forest products, such as fruits, nuts, flowers, medicines, spices, etc., can enable farmers to guarantee their products meet an approved standard and therefore receive a higher price for their goods and/or participate in niche market contract farming. However, we are aware that certification is often an expensive process, particularly for individual farmers. Therefore, when we talk about certification, it is often necessary to also talk about farmer organization and cooperatives. In fact, almost all of the challenges on the slide can be more easily addressed through organized farmer. Now, I'd like to share a case study. And although the specific example is not certified through PEFC, I would like to share it anyway, as it is an example of the benefits agroforestry product certification can provide a community. This case study is in Vietnam, where a community partnered with FAO's Forest and Farm Facility, or FFF. In Binh Minh, there were a number of farmers who were growing acacia and agroforestry systems with crops, fruit trees, and chickens. They would generally sell their acacia individually to buyers, supplementing their income by selling their crops, fruits, and livestock when needed. But generally, these agricultural products were used at the household level. With the support of FFF, the farmers received technical training and were organized into the Binh Minh Agroforestry Cooperative, consisting of 18 members and a cumulative area of 60 hectares. Community cooperation, plus investments from private-public partnerships, led to the establishment of an FSC certified sawmill that supplies one of the region's largest timber processing companies, which in turn has contracts with IKEA. Within 5 years, the cooperative generated around $55,000 in profits per year and employed 15 community members full-time with wages well above the minimum wage or poverty line. If you want more examples of how cooperation can help to overcome many of the agroforestry challenges faced by farmers, I invite you to check out the publication in this QR code, Agroforestry Uptake, Tactics that Smallholder Farmers Use to Overcome Barriers to Adoption. The publication provides 7 examples from 6 countries in the Global South, featuring several of the best-known agroforestry products, including coffee, cocoa, livestock, spices, and wood. While these examples don't necessarily address certification specifically, these are great examples where communities would greatly benefit from certification of their agroforestry products if they have not yet already been certified through other certification bodies or systems. Many general examples where agroforestry systems are well suited for certification. There are agroforestry system arrangements that are better suited than others, and there are also contractual instruments that can be used to enhance the agroforestry systems. Common agroforestry systems that are suitable for the certified production of wood and non-wood forest products may include alley cropping, shelter belts, boundary and buffer systems. There are also contractual arrangements whereby farmers or cooperatives rent land to companies. The farmer gains regular income from the rent, benefits from learning proper tree management, and is often given a percentage of the income after harvest. The company gains regular patrolling and maintenance of their land, benefiting from the farmer's land management. An example of a well-suited agroforestry system that also often includes a contractual element is the Tonga system, a type of shifting cultivation whereby companies give farmers access to their woodlots, allowing farmers to grow crops between rows of trees and then grazing once the canopy is closed. Farmers gain crucial access to land for their farming activities. Meanwhile, companies gain from regular patrolling and maintenance, including weeding. While most of us are familiar with timber certification, it is my understanding that PEFC's Tree Outside Forest certification does allow for the certification of non-wood forest products. Bundling the certification of both wood and non-wood forest products from trees outside forests in agroforestry systems would increase the incentives and the income for farmers to engage in more sustainable agri-food practices, as well as potentially reducing auditing burden. While there are a number of benefits to certification, including higher production standards that improve worker safety, access to extension services, and improved prices and market access, the reality is that many of these benefits are dependent on the market willing to pay for higher prices. If certified sustainably produced agroforestry products receive the same price as intensively unsustainably produced products, then generally farmers prefer more intensive practices. It is also important to take into consideration land and tree tenure, as well as high costs associated with certification. That said, with intentional agroforestry system design that includes business planning, it is possible to mitigate challenges to agroforestry implementation and its certification, and at the same time optimize the return on investment and other socioeconomic and environmental benefits. I would like to conclude with the following. Anyone who has ever built anything, furniture, a household, etc., knows that it takes multiple tools to complete the task. Therefore, it is important to note that certification is only one tool within the toolbox. It will likely not be enough on its own, but should be complemented with other tools, including agroforestry extension services, production subsidies, investments in markets for agroforestry products. At the end of the day, it will take strategic partnership to successfully implement agroforestry at scale. FAO is happy and ready to collaborate to ensure that the transformation of agri-food systems through agroforestry is possible. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or would like to follow up, please email us at agroforestry@fao.org.
So thank you, Elaine, even if you're not here, for this very insightful presentation. And we are now ready to move on to our next speakers, Konstantin Muraru and Jerry Lawson from EURAF, the European Agroforestry Federation. EURAF represents agroforestry associations from more than 20 European countries and promotes the use of trees on farms throughout Europe through the collaboration with academia, policymakers, and EU stakeholders. So with a background in environmental sciences and international affairs, Konstantin is the Secretary General of EURAF, and he's in charge of EURAF activities in Brussels, working on advocacy towards the EU institution and fundraising activities. Jerry Lawson, the policy advisor, is a forester and ecologist with a long experience of environmental research issues in Europe, and he has contributed to European agroforestry, climate, and bioenergy policy issues over the past 20 years. So Konstantin and Jerry, the floor is yours.
Thanks for the introduction, Ariana. So I'll start presenting in the morning session, and then Jerry will also cover the slides in the afternoon. But both of us will be available for the Q&A session. It's great to be here with us. So it's my turn to thank PEFC for inviting URAF to be part of this event, which is I would argue not only about trust, but about the different layers of complexity when dealing with trees. And as URAF is a European agroforestry organization, we will strive to provide an European but not Eurocentric approach to the challenges, different challenges we have in the area of policy and implementation. Complementing maybe what you said, Ariana, so URAF is an umbrella organization which represents associations from all across Europe, promoting agroforestry through research, primarily through research projects. And our mandate, having an office in Brussels, is to bridge the gap between the national context and the EU dimension. And I would argue we're doing this with some sort of success, as in the past years we have managed to achieve different milestones, such as having, for example, definitions at EU level, but also regulatory certainty at national level. In other words, all EU member states have definitions for agroforestry, which take into account their context at local level. I'm also aware that we have lots of participants from outside Europe. So if there are any questions you might have about EU jargon or EU policy matters, do not hesitate to raise your hand or to use the Q&A box. It was very nice to hear the presentation of Elaine earlier, so I'll try to avoid covering the same subjects. But overall, as Elaine talked about scaling up agroforestry, which is also priority for us in Europe, we would argue there are also lots of resources, agroforestry resources out there. And as you may see here on the upper right-hand side, according to a paper developed about 9 years ago, the conclusion was that 8.8% of EU's agricultural land is agroforestry. So this means, lots of potential also for certification. But at the same time, also, as you may see, particularly in Central, Eastern, and Northern Europe, lots of potential to expand the existing agroforestry area. And if I can change the slides. There we go. So what's our focus, as illustrated here on this slide? We're striving to use, let's say, output from our work done in research projects, to unlock, let's say, the opportunities under the EU legislation. But still, we have, I think, lots to do when it comes to raising awareness about the potential of agroforestry. And possibly one of these challenges is the fact that agroforestry may be seen as a new term, and in some cases it may be seen as a concept which either belongs to the forestry world or the agricultural world. So this is a recurrent challenge we have in our day-to-day life in Brussels. And perhaps this illustrates why agroforestry was omitted by the Commission in some flagship documents, while at the same time it was widely recognized, for example, in the ongoing discussions on the legislation on carbon farming. So as I mentioned, we have a definition at EU level, and again we have national, let's say, interpretations of those different concepts related to agroforestry in the national common agricultural policy strategic plans. So I think this slide is self-explanatory. What I would focus on, and I would encourage colleagues to have a look at our briefings, which may be available, which may be downloaded via Zenodo, is the typology of agroforestry practices. And I think this is also um, an illustration of the fact that essentially, as we perceive agroforestry in Europe, most of the practices would take place on agricultural land, while essentially forest grazing and food forest would be primarily or most commonly found in land categorized as forest. And the fact that we've managed to let's say group those different practices in this typology doesn't mean that the work is over. On the legal front, we still have some challenges, which actually, because Elaine, I think, also mentioned the aspect of a baseline. We still have some challenges when it comes to quantifying how much agroforestry is out there, and most importantly, um, what is the extent of newly established agroforestry on a yearly basis. And we really hope that in the near future, the EU legislative context will help us to make progress in this area. I'll maybe rapidly go through these slides because they're mostly pictures, but I hope colleagues in the audience will have the chance to have a better understanding when it comes to the concepts behind those practices. So wood pasture is essentially common all across, I would argue, all across Europe. But perhaps colleagues in the Iberian Peninsula are fairly familiar with the concept of dehesas and montados in Spain and Portugal, where essentially these kind of wood pastures are fairly common. Alley cropping already mentioned by Elaine, and you may also see here some let's say interpretations of how we perceive some benefits or challenges related to the practices. Ali copis, among others, which may also be relevant when we talk about the production of high quality biomass, and the list go on. But for the sake of time, I'll maybe rapidly go through these slides. And maybe going to the discussion on policy. There we go. I think several of you in the audience have come across the EU deforestation regulation, which in fact obviously has a noble goal, but for us, I think it led to an exacerbation of the challenges I was referring to earlier, namely the fact that agroforestry may fall in a gray area from a legislative standpoint, and essentially here the issue we had with the for example with the forest monitoring regulation is that it used a one size fits all approach, which could have led to not essentially omitting from quantifying large areas of agroforestry. And as a concrete example, just to tell you, essentially colleagues in a project, again, I'll maybe go rapidly through these slides because I think they're self-explanatory. Colleagues in a new funded project, they looked at the region of Extremadura in Spain, just to have a better understanding of how much agroforestry could be omitted by such one size fits all approach. And as you can see at this table, the Joint Research Center, using this FAO definition of forest, quantified the extent of forest as being close to a million hectares. It's the figure 968,000 hectares. But in fact, what is reflected on the ground is a bit different. Lots of these areas are essentially agroforestry areas. And according to the land parcel identification system in Spain, which is called SIGPAC, about 20% of what was considered forest by the JRC is essentially reported as forest on the ground. So this is, I think, a concrete illustration, and I will invite you to have a look at Policy Briefing 15, developed by some of our colleagues in the context of the project Digitaf, to have a further read, because I think this is not a unique case in Europe. This is again an illustration that we need to rely on more accurate data and to take advantage of the tools we have at our disposal, mostly through national means.
Sorry to interrupt.
How much time? Yeah.
If you can start concluding.
Yeah. We'll wrap up in a bit. I think another interesting example to look at comes from France. And again, right, so the French authorities, as I think as one of the leading countries in the area of agroforestry, they acknowledge the difference between forest land and what is quantified as agroforestry nationally. So this initiative called Masque Forêt nationally is another attempt which may be used as a source of inspiration by other member states to better quantify agroforestry. And as you can see here, essentially agroforestry would appear in this portal developed at French level in yellow, while forest land, which is not agroforestry, would appear in green. So again, I will kindly invite you to have a look at this example of a good practice from France. And again, I'll just mention as a teaser, and Jerry will be able to elaborate on this during the Q&A. We're also looking at the possibility of using higher resolution data from member states in order to better quantify the extent of agroforestry by also mapping what is called woody landscape features. And again, this is an ongoing exercise which should produce some results in the coming months. But one of the issues is that you're mentioning, right, Ariana, there's seven, the magic number is seven. There are 7 countries which have trees outside of forest standards. There are also 7 countries which are not compliant with the Open Data Directive from 2007. So essentially, the fact that such member states do not provide geospatial information, which would also allow us to better quantify the extent of agroforestry, restricts us from having a comprehensive overview of the situation across Europe. So again, you may have a look, not to name those countries now, you may have a look at these tables afterwards. And maybe just to jump into conclusions, I think we see lots of potential to have, let's say, more harmonized definitions, but the objective is not to micromanage what happens nationally. The objective is to have measurable definitions, which again should allow us to track progress. And as mentioned, the French and the Spanish examples are useful. On the typology, again, we see lots of opportunities through the CRCF, the carbon farming legislation at EU level, and we see that as a facilitator, right, when it comes to aligning terminology. I won't go into FAO matters because Elaine already spoke about lots of the work done internationally. But we also see some opportunities to align with what is reported under the FAO Forest Assessment, Forest Resources Assessment report. Again, we have some work done on this. And maybe to conclude with number 4, while colleagues could read the rest of the conclusions. 2027 is the 20th anniversary of the Open Data for All initiative. So we would kindly push those member states to help us do the job at EU level, and again have a restart if you want, right? When it comes to quantifying agroforestry, and in other words, further encouraging, let's say, authorities to make progress in this area. Sorry for going a bit beyond the time. Yeah, Jerry and myself were available if you have any questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Konstantin, and thank you for highlighting the very important problem of agroforestry risking falling through the cracks. So it's important to find ways for that not to happen. So our next speakers will be introduced by Sachin Jain, which is the officiating secretary for NCCF, which is our national governing body in India. So Sachin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ariana. Can I come to the next slide? Thank you. So just a bit about the organization that we have in India. So this, like, founded in 2015, is a civil society organization. We are also the PEFC governing body in India. We have got some good, nice memberships with IUCN and GAA, and we are having observer status with UNCCD and UNFCCC also. Thank you. Next, please. Ariana, can we take next slide? Yeah. So tree outside forest, like the previous speakers also have mentioned, so it is very important to really define the TUF at the country level. So here, how we define at the country level, which might be a little different from the FAO definition, but it is according to our Indian Forest Act, any area which is not reserved, protected, and unclassified forest, and the area which is outside these classified areas, which is already a recorded forest, is called the tree outside forest here in India. And what exactly we cover under our standards are the agroforestry in block, agroforestry in non-block, like the linear plantation we were talking about, and also the standard covers the urban trees and the forest, outside the forest. Yeah. Next, please. So this is a very unique scenario in India, and this was one of the major drivers from us to PEFC to push the entirety of certification because it was not really there in any of the other certification schemes. So, so the criterias, indicators, and the principles that you're talking about in any of the standard should have a different approach while you're talking about the tree outside forest area scenario. So in India, you will be amazed to know that 72% of the raw material supply to the industries comes from the tree outside forest. It is majorly grown by the farmers here in India. Import India does have like 23%, and what comes to us in the industry from the public forest is only the 5%. So this is making a very unique scenario for India to have such a standard and a certification mechanism. Next, please. Yeah, so while we were a part of developing the entire TUF standard mechanism with PEFC and within India, what needs to be the scope. So we have, kind of derived three different approaches for implementing of the standards. One could be like industry or the supply driven, because in India, the holdings with the farmers are very small and they are not really very resourceful in terms of managing the certification requirements, So we wanted that the industry should come forward, and then they have to be managing those requirements on behalf of the farmers so that it can be done successfully. So this is like industry and the supply driven approach that we have here in India. Second is the cooperative federation or NGO driven. Here, Liana also have reflected in our presentation, is the cooperative approach. And this is like a group certification standard is a major key here. But while very small farmers, they come together in a group and make either an NGO or a cooperative or a self-help group and do the needful for the other members, especially this certification requirements. And the requirements comes from the certification bodies. Third is the urban community managed. Here is something that these resources are not really for something to go as a raw material to the industry, but it gives a lot of other ecosystem services to the people living in the urban areas. So it needs to be primarily managed by either the municipality of those areas or the resident welfare association, like this small association within a neighborhood. They can do that. And the forest department also can come into the picture while they are holding certain resources with the other resources that you have in the neighborhood. So this is how, in three ways, this certification standard can be implemented. Next, please. So a great journey that we have had with Hindustan Pencils Private Limited is India's largest manufacturing pencil manufacturing company, and it was a good process to learn from them, about their practices and their procurement system, and it was also a learning for them in terms of implementing these standards and consolidate the entire supply chain so that it can be certified also. So we have had a lot of challenges, but a very good journey. And I would like to welcome Bhamik here, who's been the main force behind it and then could really take this initiative forward from his company's perspective. He's president, international business and digital information with Hindustan Pencils. And this company is not only meeting the indigenous requirement in the country, which is almost the 80% share that they have, but they are exporting to a lot of Western and the third world countries as well. So Bhamik will take you through about his experiences, how they've done it. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies, from me. Thank you. Thank you, Ariana.
Thank you, Sachin, for the introduction, and thank you, PEFC, for inviting us to share our experience at this webinar. Our company was established in 1958, and now with over 6 decades of manufacturing experience, we today convert 13,000 cubic feet of wood into 9.6 million pencils on a daily basis. We are committed to our ecological responsibility by sourcing 100% timber from trees outside forests since the 1980s. Prior to this, we used to source cedar from the northern state of Jammu and Kashmir and also from California in the United States. I don't think it's okay. Today, we are dependent on the species poplar, which is grown in the state of Jammu and Kashmir in India. It is a boundary plantation crop, which is an agroforestry crop grown by farmers, has a very short rotation cycle of 5 to 6 years. Trees outside forests in India are all trees which are growing outside the recorded forest area and mainly grown by farmers for whom their primary focus is sustenance farming, but this grows at the boundary of the farm. Most of the farmers are having a very small land holding, less than 2 hectares, which is constitutes over 86% of the total farmland in India. The key challenges that were faced by the wood-based industries in India were rather lack of third-party certification to certify agroforestry and TOF resources. The conventional forest certification models were not suitable as the farmers had very small patches of land and it would just not be economically viable for them to do so. And this restricted our access to global markets that insisted on a certified product. Solutions offered by PEFC and NCCF TOF certification is a very well-balanced blend of local adaptation and global acceptance. The certification is facilitating us by giving us market access where there are international timber regulations and international buyers that are wanting to procure with products which are certified. This strengthens our credibility and traceability and sustainability across the whole TOF supply chain. As an industry, we facilitated by forming a farmer association, which today has over 160 members. This strengthened our collaboration between the industry and farmers. And we are supporting by capacity building, that is training the farmers on documentation, compliance, and certification processes. We also bear the cost partially to reduce the financial burden for very small farmers. And we, along with education, also do sapling distribution. So as an industry-led facilitation, we were early adopters for renewable farm-grown timber sourcing, where we recognize structural gaps in fragmented agroforestry, facilitated adoption of PEFC, NCCF, TOF certification, and integrated certification into our core procurement strategy. We've enabled aggregation of small and marginal farmers under a group model, generating awareness and capacity building at the farm level, and simplified compliance and record-keeping systems which are aligned with the PEFC and NCCF standard. Hence, the industry support reduced certification barriers for the small landowners. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for this very nice example of how the industry can support smallholders into accessing certification. So we are now moving on to the Q&A for agroforestry. So are there any questions in the chat? Otherwise, in the interest of time, we will proceed with the urban forestry session, but you can keep asking your question within the chat.
Thanks, Ayana. There are no questions right now in the Q&A box, so if anyone wants to add one very fast, we can wait. Otherwise, we can continue with the next session. And thank very much our speakers. Of course, they have shared their details, so if you have more questions to them, please reach out to them as well. Thanks very much. I don't see any Q&A, so Ariana, I think we can move to the next session.
We'll proceed. Okay, so we have now reached the urban forestry session of our webinar. So as with agroforestry, Trees in cities have always existed, yet urban forestry is gaining increasing attention, both for the role it can play in the climate crisis, but also for the well-being benefits that it can provide to citizens. And in the next presentation, we will look at its potential and the ways it can be developed in practice. Also, if you would like to find out more about PEFC work in urban forestry, again, please scan the QR code displayed here on the slide. We will be showing it again at the end. So I'm delighted to present our first speaker for this session, which is Dr. Cecile Konijnendijk. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Perfect.
So Cecile has over 30 years of experience in urban forestry and nature-based solution, combining research, teaching, and advisory work around the world. He co-leads the Nature-Based Solution Institute, and he has held professorship across Europe, North America, and Asia, while advising governments in more than 30 countries, as well as organizations such as FAO and UNICEF. And he is the author of several influential books and the creator of the globally adopted 3+30+300 principle, which I am sure a lot of you, if you're practitioners, have heard about, which is an evidence-based guideline for urban greening launched in 2021. So Cecile, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ariana, and thank you, PEFC, for inviting me as we wait here to get my slides up. I'm really looking forward to sharing the idea of urban forestry with you. Let's see if I can move the slides. I think I have control, right? Yeah.
Yes, you have control.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. There we go. There's sometimes just a little delay on the slides. My apologies for that. But yeah, so I thought I would introduce to you a little bit of urban forestry background and also stress really the need for sustainable approaches to management. Ariana, maybe you could help me to click because the remote doesn't seem to work. So yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, focusing on a sustainable management approach. And of course, you can already imagine, right, that there's a nice link here also to certification schemes. So I'm really pleased to be part of this initiative with PEFC and also acknowledge the work I've been doing with my colleagues at SFI in North America, for example. So it's great to see Meg here, Meg Hanna. Next, please. So urban forestry really has a long background, right? It dates back many, many centuries. This picture here is from a place called the Haagse Bos, the Hague Forest, near the Dutch city of The Hague, where already in the 16th century, citizens came together to protect their forest from the idea of cutting it for military purposes and for generating income for our first king. And at that stage, at the end of the 16th century, the Act of Redemption was signed, which really is kind of an urban forestry initiative avant la lettre, one can say. But even today, if you go to a city like Paris, you see that trees and forests are brought back into the city. This is the Place de Catalogne in central Paris that used to be a very harsh and paved area and is now actually a small forest. So urban forestry really has this long history of hundreds of years behind it. Next, please. So what is urban forestry all about? So in the past, we have, together with colleagues, written quite a lot about this. It is not forestry. It is actually an interdisciplinary field that brings together expertise from landscape architecture, planning, ecology, of course, also forestry, but also, for example, the social sciences. Like agroforestry does in a way, right? It brings together different types of tree and associated vegetation, anything to do with the urban, but also the peri-urban. And it really ranges from very kind of planning and high-level approaches to planting trees in specific locations, a very technical part of the operation. It's strategic, so it often has a long-term perspective, focuses on multiple benefits, anything from promoting public health to cooling cities, to also in some cases providing food and wood and other products. It is also participatory, ideally, right? So it works with local communities in providing the benefits to these communities. And then, and this always sounds a little bit obvious, but it's urban, which means for a forester like myself, that we really have to adapt to urban contexts and deal with urban conditions. And the fact there's a lot of interest, a lot of stakeholders in these urban areas. And trees and cities are not always a happy match in that sense in terms of, for example, growing conditions. Next, please. So, of course, there are many reasons why we would have trees and urban forest in our cities. These are some nice overviews in a publication prepared together with UNECE. And I think today a lot of the focus is on things like cooling, adapting cities to climate change, public health promotion, but also, for example, providing biodiversity in cities that are often also biodiversity hotspots. And I said also increasingly, we look more at things like providing different products from the urban forest as well. Next, please. So this is a great example of some of the research that is coming out these days on the importance of urban forest, a study that shows that if we could achieve a 30% tree canopy cover in our cities, we could cool urban neighborhoods sufficiently to actually save 1/3 of the people who are currently dying prematurely because of heat waves. So these are pretty big numbers. In Europe, this could mean on an annual basis, thousands of lives that are prolonged. People could live longer if our cities will be greener and cooler. Next, please. Yeah, and this has also led then to some of the research colleagues calling for urban forests to really be integrated into climate action and into biodiversity strategies. So yeah, we see a lot of policy attention these days, I think, for urban forest, and this also includes initiatives like the European Nature Restoration Regulation. Next, please. The problem is, as we know, all these benefits are there, that we see on the other end a trend of decreasing tree canopy cover in most of our cities in Europe, but also outside of Europe. And this is really problematic if you know that in Dutch large cities, 70% of the neighborhoods are currently not green enough. They don't provide enough canopy cover, and they don't provide enough access to parks and other green spaces. And also another issue is actually that tree populations as they are today in cities are not diverse enough, are not ready enough for climate change, which means that cities like London face tremendous challenges to keeping their urban forest healthy and have to really start thinking about having more climate adapted species as part of their urban tree population. Next, please. Fortunately, we see some great initiatives. I already mentioned the Nature Restoration Regulation that actually looks at things like a minimum canopy cover of at least 10%, but then an increase over the years after 2031 for all European cities, urban areas. We also have initiatives like biodiversity net gain in the United Kingdom, which is a principle that states that for every development, every housing scheme, every industrial expansion, the biodiversity after the project needs to be higher than the biodiversity that was there before. And there's a very detailed scoring system. And this is a legal requirement now enforced on developers in the United Kingdom. Next, please. So I just thought in the second part of my talk to briefly go over some principles that I can see for sustainable urban forest management, for the long-term securing of the urban forest and the benefits it provides. So we should really look at providing the benefits of trees outside forest in urban areas, right, for urban forest to everybody. We should have a strategic, a long-term approach. We should focus on assessment, monitoring, and evidence-based metrics. We should have collaborative approaches and coordination, good stewardship, and then also linking very nicely, I think, to the PEFC work, communication and accountability of management. Next, please. So first of all, the equity issue, the tree equity issue, providing fair and full access to urban forests to everybody living in our cities and towns. And this is not only a European issue, but also an issue in North America, in the global South, etc. Really important that everybody has access to trees and their benefits. Next, please. Then we also need strategies, really clear visions that are long-term for our urban forest. How do you want to see our urban forest develop over the next decades? And one example of this is work we did for the city of Birmingham in the UK, where we developed an urban forest master plan for a 30-year time period with a clear vision, but then also, if you could show the next, please, a very clear matrix of actions to be taken, key performance indicators, for example, relating to changing and improving tree canopy cover in different parts of the city. Next, please. So we also need to really focus ourselves on the latest evidence and research. And we know a lot today about what we should do in promoting urban forest benefits. And these have to do with things like letting trees grow older and larger so they provide more benefits, offer a greater variety of tree experiences, definitely enhancing urban forest canopies, but also, of course, managing possible negative effects that we can have when we live with trees. Think about allergies or maybe some risks associated with poor tree management that could be a problem to deal with. And we overall have to keep our urban forest diverse and resilient. Next, please. So as already mentioned, one of the things I did as an evidence-based metric is this 330-300 principle, which really calls for seeing enough trees from where we live, work, or go to school, having a minimum canopy cover in our neighborhoods, which should ideally reach 30% or even more, but also, and this is in line with the World Health Organization recommendation, have an urban green space, a high quality park within 300 meters from where we live. So together these three metrics would bring many, many different benefits in terms of public health, climate, and other aspects to all people in our cities. Next, please. And collaboration is really key. So we need in our cities, for example, stakeholders, municipal departments to work together. And some great examples of that exist in places like Celje in Slovenia, in Malmö in Sweden, but also in Seattle, where we have cross-cutting horizontal collaborations within city systems to promote urban forestry. Next, please. Then stewardship is really key, and this deals with really good management, long-term management, working for the public good, working with the community and local stakeholders, and also really sharing responsibilities for the urban forest, especially knowing that most of the trees in cities are not owned by cities and not managed by cities, but actually by other actors like private homeowners, non-profits, state forest organizations, and so forth. And also we have to think about things like the rights of nature, right? What do we actually give in terms of giving some responsibilities and rights to nature itself, to trees itself as actors. Next, please. And then the final aspect is also this idea of communication and accountability. So this is a great example on the left from Malmö in Sweden that sends out this tree report every year to its inhabitants, showing how is the city doing in terms of expanding tree canopy cover, creating new parks, how are they doing with tree diversity, etc. And then of course here, certification standards like those by PEFC, but also SFI and other partners are actually really essential to demonstrate that management is actually done in the appropriate way based on the best possible professional expertise and evidence. Next, please. So I think for urban forestry, there is definitely a bright perspective. There's a lot of attention to it, but it really will require that we focus not only on tree planting, this is often the popular topic, but really on this long-term sustainable management approach. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you very much for the presentation and also for highlighting a lot of the good initiatives that are around the world. So I would say there is a bright perspective. So our next speakers will be introduced by Megan Hanna, which is the Director of Urban and Community Forestry for SFI, which is our national governing body in the US. So Meg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ariana, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Bonjour à toutes et tous. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for your interest in urban forestry. As Ariana introduced, a Sustainable Forestry Initiative, SFI, is the national governing body for the US for PEFC. We are across the United States and Canada. We are an international nonprofit whose mission is to advance sustainability through forest-focused collaboration. After about 3-year effort, public comment period, and insight from an expert task group, of which Cecil was a member, and we thank him for his contribution, we released the SFI Urban and Community Forest Sustainability Standard in 2023. It is available on our website, free for consultation in English, en français and espagnol. And since the release in 2023, over 20,000 acres or over 8,200 hectares are certified to the SFI Urban and Community Forest Sustainability Standard. This includes municipal local government property in Canada and university property in the United States. To recount the lived experience of implementing and auditing to the standard, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Michelle Mateo and thank her for speaking today. And just a little bit about Michelle before we hand the microphone over to her. Michelle Mateo is a licensed Massachusetts forester, certified tree farm inspector, and International Society of Arboriculture, ISA certified arborist. Michelle is based in Connecticut in the United States with over 20 years in the forest sector. She is the Forestry Technical Scheme Manager and Senior Lead Auditor for the certification body NSF, a legal globing management system certification body. For over 16 years, Michelle has accumulated experience auditing to SFI, PEFC, FSC in chain of custody, fiber sourcing and forest management. With those audits, additionally, her expertise includes audits to the SFI Urban and Community Forest Sustainability Standard, and that experience spans across the continental United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Thank you, Michelle, for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Meg, and thank you to PEFC for inviting me to share with you today. So I'm going to talk about certification to SFI's Urban and Community Forest Sustainability Standard. So as Meg said, NSF is a certification body. It's actually based in Michigan since 1944, and NSF's mission is dedicated to improve human health and planet health. So we work with many private and public entities and audit to all of those standards that Meg had mentioned that I also audit to. So this was a little bit of the slide that Meg had on the screen a minute ago as well. The standard came into effect a little more than a year ago, and we have a few audits under our belt with it. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about that and that process and how that unfolded. So I'll just say urban and community or urban and community standard, because the urban and community forest sustainability standard is a little bit of a mouthful. So I'll abbreviate it. Yeah, Meg's smiling. We've talked about what kind of acronym could come from this, and there's not one that easily rolls off the tongue. So, so with the standard, sorry, I'm having trouble going back and forward here. There we go. With the standard, someone can opt to have full certification to the standard. So there are 16 objectives. So they can choose to be audited to all 16 of those, or they can choose to have a thematic certification where there are 4 themes: community well-being and human health, environmental conservation leadership, climate and disaster resilience, and urban forest improvement. So someone could choose to be audited to all of them, one of them, any number of them, depending upon where they're at in the process in their urban forestry journey. And then these are evaluated at an annual audit. With a thematic one, you're audited at either 5 or 6 of the objectives. And then if you opt for the full certification, it is the 16 objectives that you're evaluated against. So who can be certified? By the many people who came together to create the urban and community standard, the definition of urban and community forest was left flexible, and that was intentional. It can be a broad definition. So it could be a city or a town, an educational institution, indigenous communities, corporate campuses, hospitals. Essentially, anyone who owns or manages an urban or community forest is eligible for this certification. And if someone is interested in the certification, there's a formal process like forest management or chain of custody that's followed, where you would initially contact SFI and let them know that you're interested, prepare your program, and then move forward with the steps of contracting with a certification body, having your audit, and completing your audit successfully to have a certificate awarded. So why sustainable urban forests matter? I think all of our speakers have touched on this, and there are environmental, social, and health and economic benefits that go along with this. So ecosystem services, cleaner air and water, heat stress reduction, reduced asthma rates, better quality of life, reduced urban crime, better mental health. There's so many different reasons why we should support our sustainable urban forests. So Clemson engaged NSF as a certification body in 2024, and we completed the very first urban and community forest audit in 2025. And we issued their first certificate in April of 2025. So as it was the first one and the first audit that was done, there were some challenges with it. And there were some pretty interesting things that came out of it. So there were challenges with data planning and implementation. So those were the main things. So when you're trying to manage data, the objectives of the urban standard, they cover a wide variety of things. So objective 3, it addresses protection and conservation of biodiversity. So when you're looking at biodiversity data, most states have databases for rare, threatened, and endangered species. So who in that organization is going to find the data? Who's going to manage it? Who will house it? How will the presence or absence of those species be addressed in the planning process and then implemented? And we found that information was also contained in silos. And so your planning department may have maps of green spaces, building footprints, stormwater detention or drainage systems, utilities, heat maps. So these are some of the things that are part of Objective 7 with climate smart management. In Objective 10, which is management and care of forests and trees, your facilities or maintenance department may be who's handling all of your tree care. So they would be overseeing planting, removals, mapping of those locations, and regular maintenance of those trees. But these distinct groups don't necessarily talk to one another and don't talk to one another on a daily basis as well. Objective 10, which is disaster readiness, response, and recovery. Clemson University has an emergency management plan, but this isn't a publicly available plan. It's confidential. It's not for public consumption. However, when I was there, Clemson had recently experienced a hurricane, and they were able to use the documentation of their post-hurricane response as dictated in part by that emergency management plan as evidence of how they were meeting portions of the standard. And then many organizations have a combination of people who do work for them. So they may have a mix of in-house staff and contracted workers. And often capital projects will include consultants as part of a planning or implementation process. So if you are requiring an environmental impact assessment before a project starts, does that consultant provide their survey data to you that they conducted pre-project? And is it in a usable format that you can have? Do they have the number and size of stems, the location of the species, the location of those trees, the species of those trees? Will they provide that data back to you, the certificate holder? And is it going to be in a usable format? Will it be in a GIS data set that someone can manage? And then who would house that data? Who would be the one for being responsible for updating that data? And, it's important in the initial planning and feedback stages that if you are requiring things, if you are requesting native species to be planted, if you are following something like ISA best management practices, at a university level, do those procurement and planning entities understand those details? And are they put into the contract at the initial stages of that project so that you don't have to go back and forth to try to get something that you really would like to have in a project that you're putting in place on campus? So contractual requirements could include minimum size of seedlings, a certain quality of planting stock, metrics that cover soil composition and soil volume. And does your regular nursery that may provide your planting stock, can they meet those specifications? So there's a lot of this detail that may need to be known up front before you ever get into the part where you're implementing your project. And this picture is a photo of a large it's essentially an area to mitigate stormwater. It is a valley in the middle of campus on Clemson that was overrun. It was a treed valley, but it was overrun with invasives. It had a lot of brush in it as well. And so now what it has been turned into as an outdoor classroom. So this piece on the left, there are these rocks staged, so it's a mini amphitheater. So professors can come and have classes out there. In the stream that runs down the middle. It's also a meditative space with a waterfall, and it's still providing its original purpose. It's still mitigating stormwater on campus. So the positive takeaways of this certification, it's providing a framework for long-term management. Urban forestry is different in that traditional forest management, you have a forest management plan, you've got site level data, harvest data, surveys, inventories that are supporting your management plan. But for urban and community forests, as Cecil said, it's really interdisciplinary. You have many different plans that you're using to support and create this. You've got an emergency management plan, a tree care plan, your communications plan. On the university itself, they have a wellness plan, and then there's the master plan for campus, stormwater management plans, strategic plans for a university. So all of these things need to come together to help provide evidence and support the urban forest in many ways. So this framework, the benefits of it, it provides a framework for long-term management. And it gives that framework despite staffing changes. As we know, there can be a lack of institutional knowledge when somebody who has been at a university for a long time or in a position for a long time, and it codifies the institutional knowledge. It gets it down on paper rather than being in someone's head. So it allows that information and all that knowledge to be carried through, and it helps with succession planning as well. Another benefit is communication. It promotes communication. It helps break down these silos where data and information may be held. And it is an intentional process. You know, it is demonstrating that you are stewarding the urban forest, and it's not some random process that you're following. You have a process, and SFIs includes a commitment to continual improvement as part of all of their certification standards. For example, if there are complaints that are received,
1 minute.
Thank you. If there are complaints received about road construction or trees being removed for a sidewalk project, the plan is already in place to continue that long-term health of the urban forest. You're maintaining that. And so you're following an intentional process. You have a commitment to the standard and to the requirements, and you can show that to someone who's questioning a decision that's being made on campus. And then it's celebrating, you know, what you're doing. Clemson, by part of its appeal, is a very open campus. It is open to the public. They can walk the grounds. And a large appeal of someone who walks those grounds is in fact due to their urban forest and what exists there and what has been tended there and has been maintained over the years. And with wellness and urban tree care, human health, environmental stewardship, they're intertwined, and they all make a beneficial area for people to be and people to live. And this is an image of the accessible bird viewing platform at Clemson's Botanical Gardens on campus. So thank you very much, and look forward to seeing if there are any questions. Thank you, Meg, for the introduction as well.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for highlighting in practice what getting certified means, both the challenges and the positive aspects. So we are now moving forward to our next speakers, who again will not be introduced by me, but by John Kirby from PEFC UK. So John.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone from the UK. Thank you, Ariana. My name is John Kirby. I'm the National Secretary for PEFC UK. As the name suggests, we're the national governing body for PEFC within the UK. As Ariana already mentioned at the start of the webinar, I'm delighted to say that the UK is one of 7 countries that has a trees outside forest standard that is endorsed by PEFC. The scope of our standard here covers trees in urban environments, and there are kind of 3 areas where we see the potential for uptake of certification. Firstly, within the house building sector, as Cecil already mentioned in his talk, for our house builders that operate under a leasehold system, where they build the houses, sell the houses, but then retain the management responsibility of the land. These house builders are now covered by the biodiversity net gain regulations, which requires them to demonstrate a 10% net gain in biodiversity, and that benefit has to be demonstratable for 30 years. So a lot of the developers are planting trees in order to demonstrate their compliance with legislation. And the Trees Outside Forest Standard provides a potential framework for responsible management of these tree stocks. Also, private landowners. The photograph at the top of the slide there is of the Canary Wharf estate in the financial district of London. Within that area, there's 1,000 mature trees, and again, The TOF standard provides a framework for the management of that resource. And then lastly, probably our main target area is councils, municipalities who have significant areas of trees, both in street trees, park trees, etc. Recent study by the Forest Research in the UK showed that a third of our tree cover is outside designated forest areas. So the potential, tree coverage that could be included within the scope of a TOF standard is significant. The standard itself was developed in accordance with PEFC standard setting procedures, part of which included the pilot of the requirements. And I'm pleased to introduce Rob Shaw, who actually conducted the pilot audit during his time at Soil Association. Rob joined PEFC as head of standards and integrity back in November 2023. He's a qualified forester. He worked for 26 years for one of the UK's largest forest management companies, where he established and managed their FSC and PEFC forest management certification system. From 2013 to 2023, when he joined PEFC, he worked for the Soil Association as a technical manager and looked after their forest management and chain of custody standards. And like I say, he conducted the pilot audit of the pilot study that we conducted with Sheffield City Council. So without further ado, I will hand over to Rob.
Thanks, John. And Ariana, if you can run the slides, pleasure to be with everybody today. So I'm going to take you very quickly through the history of Sheffield. It's quite an interesting story, and how the pilot audit was carried out. And that's just a picture of a very famous elm tree in Sheffield. And we can flick to the next slide, please. So this is known as the Chelsea Road elm tree, and it's we have Dutch elm disease in the UK, so many elm trees have died, coming from the south when I was a child up to where I live now in Scotland, where the disease has appeared in the last decade. Sheffield is a very industrial city with a long industrial heritage, and there are lots of trees which date from the Victorian era, so 19th century into the 20th century. It was heavily bombed in the Second World War, and then there's been lots of urban regeneration. It's a very large metropolitan authority, and so you have inequality of the amount of trees in the city. You have old Victorian parts of the city with very old trees. You have developments through the 20th century where you have more deprivation, and you have, for example, a preponderance of cherry trees in the 1950s and 60s developments. So next slide, Ariana. So we used the PEFC trees outside forest standard to conduct the audit, and this is adapted from the main forestry standard for the UK, what's called the UCWAS standard, UK Woodland Assurance Standard. And I was part of the working group which helped develop this standard. So we took out any indicators which relate to mainstream forestry, for example, hunting, and then we adapted any of the other indicators to make it suitable for the urban forestry environment. So the actual pilot study took place a few years ago now. Next slide. So the standard is laid out in the way that's shown on the screen. And so it covers off all aspects of management planning and operations in terms of tree surgery and tree care, looking at environmental concerns, looking at the relationship between the community and workers. And so it was tested to make sure that it provided an auditable result and suitable to the scope. Next slide. So just to talk about Sheffield for a while, and there is a QR code at the end which you can click on and copy to study the story of how Sheffield became so important for its trees. But essentially, more than a decade ago, the Sheffield City Council decided to give a large roading contract to a private contracting company over a long-term period. And they decided to put the street trees in Sheffield into the road working contract. And if you Google Sheffield trees in the internet, you will find lots of resource about how the story developed. So Sheffield is one of the largest metropolitan authorities. It has over 33,000 street trees. They're all GIS logged on a GIS system at the council. And so that was the scope of the audit. It was the street trees in Sheffield, which grow either in the pavement, between the pavement and the road, and in some cases in the road. And quite a lot of these trees are more than 100 years old. When this contract was let, there was a huge amount of conflict developed whereby, and I won't tell you the whole story, but people ended up being arrested, being charged, people were chaining themselves to trees, all sorts of things going on, because the contractor whose primary concern was to fix the roads was cutting down hundreds of trees. And so in the lead up to doing this audit, the city council realized and the politicians realized they'd made a huge mistake. And so they completely fixed their whole approach to the way they wanted to manage the trees. And I can see Cecil nodding here. And I'm so glad to follow his presentation because they pretty much adopted a best practice approach. And if you look in the right hand side of this slide, they wrote a partnership strategy, and they ended up collaborating with several voluntary groups. One group which was specifically set up to fight the council on this issue. And so I came in to do the audit when the problem was actually receding and when this cooperation and collaboration was coming into place. And so we did a 2-day audit. I had a colleague who was helping me as a technical expert, and we went to see several sites within the city. We did an in-depth audit of the city council managers, and we also audited the private contractors depot to look at their teams. We went out to see them working. We did a full audit of all their operations with the paperwork, and we also met with members of the community. And I had an in-depth meeting with the voluntary partnership who were putting pressure on the council to improve their performance. Next slide. So in terms of stakeholder consultation, we ran a consultation period for a 6-week period. We contacted a wide range of consultees, some of which who represented groups, and we received 6 responses, some of which were very detailed. And then we followed up with interviews either in person or by phone or by video. Next slide. I'm afraid I don't have that many photos from the audit itself, but you can see here that we went out and saw a tree surgery unit operating in a street, and I observed their working for a good half an hour to an hour. I then interviewed them. I looked at all their documentation. We looked at all their policies and procedures, health and safety, examined the equipment, etc., and really had a good feel for the dedication and care that the tree surgeons put into their work. And because some of these trees are very old and some of the streets are very narrow, it really is an interesting study in how to try and keep these trees alive and maintain them for as long as possible. One policy shift that the council made was to stop cutting down trees at all unless the trees were dead, diseased or dying. And that I'll come on to that in a slide in a second. Next slide. So here we are. When we then went back to the depot, and I was imagining 33,000 trees in the population, I was imagining a rather large timber output every year coming from this tree population. But because they'd adopted this no cutting and keep the trees alive for as long as possible, what you see in the photographs there is just rotten and dead trees, and very few of them. So over a 1-year period, the actual timber output is very, very small, and either has to go to landfill because it's dead or diseased, or it literally gets sold for very small volumes of firewood. And so the value that the city council now place on the trees is very much for the health of the population, for carbon sequestration, and for all the issues which Cecil was elaborating on earlier. Next slide. So just to summarize the sort of key findings from the audit, very much spoke about management planning and documentation, and we had a good interaction, and I wrote up some thoughts on how they need to think about their medium and long-term strategy, because quite a lot of the trees in the city are coming to the end of their natural life. People are very emotionally attached to them. And in streets, you have maybe 100 trees which are the same species, the same age, the same height. And so they really needed to start thinking about and consulting on and educating the public that trees eventually die and therefore they have to be replaced. and also to try and look at the 1950s and 60s developments whereby all the trees were cherry trees, and say, look, you've got two extremes here, and what you need to do is you need to create a more diverse population. And if you look at the photograph on the right, they'd actually started doing this. They were doing research, they were doing surveys, but they were also buying some very interesting subspecies and varieties of tree and educating the public to explain why a particular tree had been planted in a particular place. Huge amounts of consultation, cooperation, very sophisticated complaints mechanism now run by the council, complete turnaround in the amount of resources to the staff who deal with the public, and the politicians also being educated to solve this problem, which was very acute. We did look at areas of grass weed control, and as a result of our audit, they immediately agreed to change their policy, whereby some of the operators inadvertently had been spraying pesticide around the base of trees, and this was fed back through the stakeholder consultation process. Next slide. Oh, sorry. So that's just a very quick run through what's a very interesting story. If anybody scans that QR code at top right there, that will take you to YouTube, where you can watch a 12-minute film from the BBC, which gives you a very potted history of how the conflict developed and then how it was resolved. And I would recommend it to you because Sheffield is now becoming a best practice hub. And a year later, we had a meeting and we gave a presentation to several other local authorities and city councils, and there was huge interest in taking up this kind of standard and this kind of auditing so that they could demonstrate to everybody that they were managing their trees in the best way. But thank you very much, and I'll pass back to Ariana.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for sharing this very interesting story, and also to have given us a sneak peek in what sustainable management looks like in reality, and actually also what audit looks like in reality. We are now to our last but not least speaker, Eric Bakker, who is the Urban Green Space Manager for the municipality of Zwolle in the Netherlands. He is dedicated to shaping the green spaces of tomorrow, and his work focuses on creating and managing a livable green city where biodiversity and healthy urban living come together, combining strategic green space planning with effective contract management. So the municipality of Zwolle is the first city to receive a PEFC Netherlands Trees Outside of Forest certificate for urban forestry, which is a very significant milestone both for PEFC Netherlands, but also for the PEFC Alliance, because it was actually the very first UF certificate which was awarded. So Eric, we're happy to hear your experience.
Yes, thank you, Ariana, for the introduction and having me here. Yes, I'm a bit short in time and I have too many slides, so I think we have to skip some slides, but thank you for helping me by clicking. Yes, well, yeah, my name is Erik Bakker. I am Urban Green Space Manager of the municipality of Zwolle. And in this presentation, I will explain why we considered PEFC certification important in Zwolle and what it took to obtain it. And the presentation will focus on how we in Zwolle meet the 6 principles of sustainable tree management, or in other words, sustainable urban forestry. And yes, of course, we are very proud on the fact we are the first municipality having the certificate. And here you see a picture where our alderman receives the certification. So yes, next slide, please. Yes, I already told this. Next slide, please. Yes. Here you see where the Netherlands is located, and also Zwolle in the Netherlands. And if you want to click, Zwolle is quite an old city. It's about 800 years old and still growing. Next slide, please. And Zwolle is located in a delta. So I don't know. Yeah, can you see? I can't point it on, but you see Zwolle in the front between the rivers, and the rivers came out in a lake, and that used to be the North Sea. So that's located in the delta, and that makes also the challenge for us to keep dry feet. And good management of our trees helps with that. Next slide, please. Zwolle has 134,000 citizens. And for the Netherlands, that is a medium-sized city. And we have over 75,000 street trees with more than 600 different species. But of those species, we have many oaks, ashes, lindens, and alders. And in the table, in the picture, you can see the Quercus robur, that is the oak. We have almost 20,000 of them. And in the total of the trees we have, that's a bit of a good balance you want to have. So that makes it vulnerable for diseases and plagues. Next slide, please. And that is what also happened with our ashes. In Europe, we have to deal with the ash dieback disease. And we had that also in Zwolle. And we had quite a number of ashes. And a long time we putting off the work to deal with that disease because the ashes get worse and worse. And we were hoping for a cure or something, but that not came. So we have to fell one day 2,000 ashes in 1 year. And otherwise we only felling 300 trees a year. So that is quite a lot for us to cut down in a year. And because we expected that our citizens would notice this, we coordinated the work with the alderman, and he demanded that the wood that had been released should be processed as locally as possible and on a highest possible sustainable way. So a local timber company assisted us with that, but we also ran into the tender policy. And in the Netherlands, if you have a public tender, it is required to request for wood that is from a sustainable source, and thereby with a certification. And that is how we came into contact with PEFC. And that was just right on time, because at that time PEFC were just in the process of drawing up the standard for trees outside the forest. Next slide, please. And just as PEFC, our municipality is committed to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And if we zoom in on goal 12, that is about circularity. It's important to know that the aim is to be fully circular by 2050. So the use of renewable sources, such as wood, is very important in this regard. Next slide. And in Zwolle too, we also have a great need for new housing. And in this image, it's a bit difficult to read, but it shows which materials are currently used for the most, and how much of those materials can be reused after the building is demolished. And what you see is, the biggest stream is concrete that's on top, and there where the arrow is, that is wood. And there should became a shift because the concrete it is not as good as to recycle, and wood is renewable, so it has to be replaced, and that makes why it is so important also for Zwolle. Next slide, please. So in order to achieve that sustainability goals, that demands that the timber, the sustainable timber is growing, and therefore it's good. You can also use not only the trees that come out of forest, but also the trees outside of the forest. So that makes this quite a big deal. Next slide, please. So how did we obtain then the certificate? Well, as a municipality, we already pursue many of the same goals as PEFC. So that is, we stand for a safe and vital tree population, and our trees contribute to a climate adaptive city. So it is important in Zwolle, we have space for trees in the city of tomorrow. Next slide, please. So for the most part, our policy was already in line with the objectives of PEFC. And the most important step was to set this all out clearly in policy plans and management plans in order to make it demonstrable. And I like to give you an overview of the 6 principles of sustainable urban forestry management in Zwolle. Next slide, please. Yes. To contribute to the global carbon cycle, that's one thing we do in Zwolle is we have a replanting obligation. So for every tree we felling, we have to replant one. And also an important principle here is that the tree canopy covers across the entire city, may not decrease, and in the coming years even must increase. So big trees are important in the accomplishment of that. And also, the larger a tree is, the more ecosystem services it provides. So those large trees are very important and only may be felled in exceptional circumstances. Next slide, please. And yes, in Zwolle, 50% of the total green area consists of ecologically managed verge and fields, and the soil beneath this vegetation is often very healthy and therefore has a greater sponge effect, and that is important in the challenge of keeping our feet dry. And in addition, the vegetation is often ecologically very interesting. And this photo shows a flower. We call it the kievitsbloem. I don't know the word in English, but it's a very rare spring bloomer, and it stands here just on the edge of the city center. So that is very special, I think. And we are also very proud on those fields. Next slide, please. Yes, and when it comes to protecting and improving biodiversity in our city, we have been putting this in practice in Zwolle for many years. Yes, we have been working with a green structure map since 1990. And this green structure aims to bring the nature from outside the city into the city. And the use of native trees within the structure reinforce that principle. So we also work with a code of conduct in the green management. And that means that, for example, When we pruning trees, we take nesting birds into account. So if we come along to prune a tree and there is a nesting bird, we skip that tree and also the neighbor trees and come back later in the year to prune as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a nice picture of a red beech, but if you put on the next slide, please. Yes, in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that we have many oak trees, and the oak processionary caterpillar is sometimes a real plague in our town. I don't know if everybody knows what the processionary caterpillar does, but it says it's hairy, and the hairs are toxic and makes you very itchy. And to control this plague, we want to attract as many natural enemies as possible. So, and in that matter, that wood lives on. So we located some dead wood and hope some insects who also predate on the caterpillar will come along. Nice. Next slide. Yes, thank you. Yes, and in order to preserve the health and vitality of the ecosystem, the use of pesticides in the management of public spaces has been banned since 1980. And we also avoid using fertilizers. And as a result, we have a lot of undisturbed soils. And that makes that we have all kind of natural spring flowers grow in different space of the city.
Eric, sorry to interrupt. If you can start concluding.
Yes,
we are running out of time.
Yeah, okay. Can you skip the next slide then, please? Yes, then we go to monitoring, measuring, and analyzing. Yeah, to demonstrate that the trees are safe and well maintained, we use a digital management system, and this system lists all the trees and contains a lot of data about each tree. Yes, if tree inspections reveal that a tree is no longer safe or vital, it is added to a felling list, and the felling list forms then the basis for a replanting list. And by recording and processing all this information on a map, we also have a clear overview for our inhabitants. And this is also provides insight into the annual growth of the tree population. So, and this together are all examples of how we already organized our tree management and how we were able to obtain the certificate quite easily. Next slide, please.
Apologies.
One back, please. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Yes. Well, what are our next steps? And we are very curious to see what the certification will bring in terms of the next steps. It's also new for us, and we are now in the first year of gaining experience in bringing certified wood on the market. And we're hoping to increase the volume in the region as more organizations will join us in the PEFC for trees outside of the forest. And well, in addition, we want to promote the certificate by using as much wood as possible ourselves in the municipality, and preferably by our own wood. So that idea also needs to grow. Well, and it is an exciting journey to discover, and we hope that this will accelerate our sustainability efforts in overall. So thank you for your attention, everybody.
Thank you, Eric. For sure, Zolde, it is a good example to inspire other municipalities to do the same. So unfortunately, we do not have time for the Q&A. I apologize for finishing a little bit later. So thank you all for participating in our webinar, and a special thank you to our speakers today for sharing such valuable insights. And we hope you found the session informative, learned something new, and feel inspired to apply these new insights in your daily work. So again, if you're interested in learning more about PEFC Trees Outside of Forest certification, or you want to start your certification journey, please feel free to scan the 2 brochures that are available here. So I'll leave them up for a couple of more seconds, and then you can contact directly Heidi and I via email if you have any specific question on QF certification. So our email are going to be in the next slide. Okay, I think you had time to scan the brochures. In any case, they're going to be present also in the links that you will receive after the webinar. And again, for any specific question, these are our contacts. So thank you very much for participating, and have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you. And thank you, Ariana, for moderating. Thank you to the speakers. Bye, everyone.